Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
So let me share the agenda today. All right. Sorry about the delay. Check with the schedule if there is any conflicts for the future. Yeah, so today is February the 8th. Welcome to the working group, the vocabulary working group at the SIG Events. Feel free to sign yourself in the participant list. Just put in the chat the link to the agenda, just in case. I added a few things in the agenda, and so feel free to add new things or let me know if there is anything else you would like to discuss. Okay, just a few announcements I wanted to do to begin with. As you probably know, we have a website now, which looks like this. Yeah, it's pretty simple right now, but we have the documentation as well from our spec website imported in. Yeah, so we'll keep working on it. If you're interested in contributing to the website, let me know, and we can make a plan for further content. I'll just try to go quickly through the announcements. If there is any question, feel free to stop me at any time. Just wanted to remind everyone we do have a mailing list. I made it open for everyone to join. I think right now last time I checked was just me and Emil on it. I think it's good to have a synchronous channel for communication for the project as well. So if you're interested, please join the mailing list. And also we have, as you see, a Slack channel, SIG Events on the SIG Foundation Slack. Hello again. My Zoom temporarily died. Sorry about that. I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yep, we still hear you and see you. Yep.
Yep. Thanks. So for issues specific to the SIG Events project, we agreed that we're going to use the GitHub issues for the spec repo. So just put the link there just as a reminder. We still have some issues on the SIG events, which are specific to SIG events. So we can either migrate them or continue on those at least there for some time until they're finished, and then make sure new ones are created in the SIG events. I wanted to remind folks about the contributor summit at CDCon. I created a Google form to get an idea of how many would be able to or interested in joining either in person or remotely, and collecting ideas for what we're going to discuss about so that we can plan for it. So please fill in the form. And also, last thing I wanted to mention is the planning project for the bit01 of the spec. It's a GitHub project I set up. It would be nice to get some feedback. If you look at what issues are in, maybe we can discuss next time what folks think might be missing from the planning, so that we can get an agreement on what we want to do for 0.1, and at least get an idea how long it will take us to get there. And thanks for
I just added the webinar that Oleg has created a doodle for us. So in a few weeks we plan to have a meetup online to discuss anything related more or less to the protocol with anyone interested outside these meetings. And of course we should plan what to do in that webinar as well, but the first thing is to have a good time for everyone, so everyone can attend that are interested. So if you haven't answered to that poll in Doodle, please go there if you're interested to participate.
Great, thanks, Emil. The reminder, I missed this one. All right, that's all the announcements, unless anyone else has anything else they would like to bring up. All right, next I had a list of issues that we could discuss about. Those discussion can take maybe some time. So if there is anything else anyone feels that we should discuss first, feel free to bring it up. Otherwise, I would start opening the first issue. So the first one is something that we got from the interoperability, the work of the SIG interoperability. It's considered taking advantage of this list of task types when qualifying event types. So basically, there is some vocabulary work going on in the interoperability, and it would make sense to have some alignment. And I think this goes back to staying in sync with the work of the interoperability. Personally, I think it makes sense to keep this working in sync with the SIG. I don't know if there is anyone who would like to look into these or anything that we need to discuss on the meeting today.
So this was presented in a SIG interop meeting. It led to quite a few discussions. I'm not sure, I'm not sure who might remember that, but I didn't understand quite if Anne-Marie would come up with an updated proposal or if she was just like happy with the current version. I don't know what this takeaway was there, just so we don't apply unfinished version, so to say.
I was part of the meeting where she presented the first time. I think it was brought up last week on SIG Interop as well, and then I was not there. But my assumption was that this is still a living PR and shouldn't be considered the final version still. There are some outstanding comments, I believe, and I also have some comments that I haven't really added yet, so I should, I guess.
sorry, you will go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say that's right. That's what I agree with. The issues are still outstanding and still under discussion. Last interoperability SIG meeting, this was brought up, but Anne-Marie wasn't there, so the discussion didn't advance much further.
Okay, yeah. There is a parallel pull request as well on pipeline stages. This is about pipeline steps. So I'm not sure which is most relevant to us. Maybe this with steps is more of, yeah, this is build step or test step or whatever. And the stages are a bit more maybe higher level, but still the stages as well, I would say, need to be notified through events, or need to be, but they should benefit from being notified through events as well. So they should also probably have specific events for them in the same, for the same reason, I guess. So I think we should relate to both those pull requests here. I'm not sure which is most prioritized for us to look into, but both are interesting, I would say.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the additional context. Yeah, I agree. I think we should look into both. But it sounds like, I mean, the work we can do on these right now is maybe joining the SIG interoperability and continue to collaborate on the discussion there. But we should wait before implementing this in city events.
That sounds a good way forward.
Okay. Anything else on this one? I can add a comment on the issue. Okay. Next one on the list is about usage of the subject in cloud events. Yeah, I don't know if anyone had a look at this. I've seen there's a comment from Eric. Yeah, I would like to start moving forward on this, adding some documentation in the cloud events binding, and possibly working with the SDK team on getting this implemented into the SDK. But I wanted to get a feeling if we had an agreement, or if there was any concern about this. So basically, the idea is that I can introduce it quickly if folks want. Well, the idea is that for OCD events, we have a related activity or an entity like a task run or an artifact or something against which to which the event is related. And so the idea was to use the subject that is an existing field in cloud events to transport the ID for this entity.
So is that more to state the context of in which this event happened, or then, or could you give an example otherwise of what the subject is really? Is it a certain pipeline step ID or
yeah,
is it something that can be reused for multiple runs of the same pipeline in different commits or whatever?
No, well, it depends on the event. So if the event is about a pipeline run started, it would be the idea of the pipeline run, right? And that's would not be then reused in other events, except when the same pipeline has been finished, and then you would have the same subject there. Or in
So
case.
Do you mean that it's just as unique as the ID on the line below, but it's more user friendly, or?
So the ID in the line below would be an ID which is specific, is unique to this event specifically,
Yeah.
while the subject is something that could be reused across events if you have multiple events associated to that specific subject. In this case, it's about task run, so you would have task run started and task run finished, probably sharing the same subject, but having different IDs.
Okay, so for one pipeline run or step run, there will be a new subject ID, which multiple events would share.
Yeah.
And that's what I would call a pipeline step context, or yeah. But of course, we can call it subject.
The name is already existing in Cloud Events Spec. It's just the proposal here is to shall we use, does it make sense to map this information onto the Cloud Event subject? It's just because it's an existing field and it can be used to filter events. For instance, if I want to look for all the events for a specific subject, maybe I get an initial event on a subject and I want to continue filtering all the other events, I can do that using the subject. But then we can have the same event. You can have the same information again within the data part. And in that we can have JSON schema, and we can use the name that we prefer. So in the example here, I have a task run ID, or we could call it context, or the naming that we decide.
Andrea, is this consistent with how Cloud Events is using this subject field?
Yes, that's my understanding. Let me bring up the Cloud Event spec. So it says the description, this describes the subject of the event in the context of the event producer. So in public subscribe scenarios, subscriber will typically subscribe to event emitted by a source, but the source identifier alone might not be sufficient as a qualifier for a specific event if the source context has an internal substructure. So in this case, if the source, let's say the source of the event is Tecton, you could have sub entities within that source, like different pipeline runs and different task runs. That's at least how I read it. There are some examples, like in this case, there is a source, which is a certain container, and the subject is the name of the file, image file.
Just thinking about the name there, I would tend to interpret it as if we, for example, would have a test step in our pipeline, then the subject would maybe be the artifact under test, or the item under test. That sounds more like a subject to me, but maybe that's not how Cloud Events would express it. Of course, Cloud Events doesn't talk about CI events at all, but I would be a bit confused maybe, but yeah.
I would agree for events specific to test. So if you're sending an event that a test is started, I think the subject there would be something specific to what is tested. For the core type of event in the example there, there was a task run, and from a task run perspective, it doesn't know about what is going on within the task run. It doesn't know whether the task run is running a test or a build or whatever. So for those kind of events, I think the subject being the ID of the task run or pipeline run or step would be appropriate. But I definitely agree that if the event was about a higher level abstraction type of event, like we have in the CI/CD bucket, we would have then the ID of the test suite being executed, probably, or the name.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. I think I saw that this is optional in cloud events, and I don't know, should we could at least in the beginning make this optional also in our SIG events spec, but we should, of course, if it should be used, it should be used in a certain way. So we should say how it should be used if we could use it. I'm not sure, or do we want this to be mandatory in the SIG events protocol? We can't really say that it's mandatory since it's on the cloud events level. We can't really enforce our schema on top level, right? Could we?
So I think from a pure SIG events point of view, it's part of the mandatory bits on SIG event side. And so since we have that information, we could always map it onto the subject when we are transporting over cloud events. But we don't have to, so we could, if let's say in the SDK, we could have a flag that say, do not set the subject. Maybe you should prepare some more examples. So let me go back to.
I think if we would make this a mandatory field, then I guess that it would be mandatory in the data part of the event, since we cannot really affect how it's done on cloud event level. But we should maybe then provide some guidance on what it should be set to, depending on what kind of step we are working in or whatever, what kind of event is sent.
Yes, absolutely. And my idea would be that we do that for the SDK, because I would expect then it's kind of what people would use to create the events. So like, if we say for pipeline type of event, it's the pipeline run ID, and if we map that to the subject. So from cloud events, from SIG events point of view, pipeline run ID is a mandatory field. And then it will be as part of the body, but we can map it onto the subject as well. And we could say we can leave it optional to map it on the subject or not. I agree with you. It doesn't have to be mandatory. And we could, if you think it's required, we could set an option. We could give an option in the SDK to say set the subject or not set the subject. If you think there are use cases where it's best not to.
No, I mean, if we will have it as mandatory in the data body of our SIG event, of course, we can say that it's, if you are sending a SIG event, it should also be in the top level, the cloud events heading level, for sure. And our SDK should then enforce that. I mean, I don't see a big reason to not set it on the top level if we have it mandatory on the data level, and we intend it to be copied between or duplicated. Yeah. In what context should it be unique then? Do we need to state something about that? I guess the ID on top level, the event ID itself is intended to be globally unique through the UUID spec.
For the it's globally unique within the source. Even the event ID is only globally is only unique within the source, right? So you cannot guarantee that events coming from different platforms will be globally unique.
Mm. But this subject then, in what way should it be unique? I mean, it could be a bit hard maybe to invent an ID that we know is unique within the source if it's not just a UUID. Maybe it requires some logic to make sure it is unique, I guess.
I would say that that's
it's
up to
implementation
the
detail. Yeah.
I would say that's up to the event source. Yeah. I don't think we should set any requirement, uniqueness requirement on the protocol, but we should say that when set, it should be used consistently to represent a resource, but that's kind of up to the source really. So I was thinking we have this general kind of context section for the protocol, which is independent of the events. And today we have require metadata, and we have the event type, ID, source, and timestamp. So we don't have a subject here. So we could also add optional metadata for CD events, and try to highlight kind of common fields that are available across different events. Like the subject would be one of those.
Would you then be taking all the optional fields in cloud events and giving best practices how to use them for CD events? Is that what the intention is here, or is it just picking a few of them?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been reading the spec.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just wondering where this, I just was wondering what the intention was with the.
Yeah. Yeah, I came to this issue by thinking about how to write the cloud event binding and trying to find a good way to set the headings there. And I guess the subject is the first one it makes sense for me to discuss. But yeah, definitely, I think it would make sense to look at the other optional fields as well. Which I think is possibly also not too many. Required attributes optional. So right, we have the data content type and data schema or schema, never sure. And this is something that we would probably set based on the discussion that we had in the past of having a schema. So we would then set the schema and the content type accordingly. Then we have the subject and time, and I think we do have time as part of our mandatory fields, but we would need to discuss whether the time from CD events would be mapped here as a time from cloud events or not. So that's a separate discussion to that. I can create an issue for that one as well. And I think that, so we have a full coverage of all the optional fields. Okay, yeah, I don't want to take too much time on this, but I don't know, Emil, do you want to maybe add your comments to the issue, or are you happy for me to?
No, I think I'm quite happy as it is. Just wanted to raise my my thoughts, but I think I'm quite happy.
Okay. Yeah, I think it
And I
was
think
very.
it's a good idea to have a subject on top level so we can filter on it. It's a bit related. That's maybe why I asked. It's a bit related to the discussion on how to reference events sent to a published event, to a
Right.
consumed
Yeah.
event. But because in Eiffel, how we do it there, we don't have this general subject in this way. We always use the event IDs themselves as this way to group things together that belong to the same pipeline step or whatever. But I wouldn't say that I dislike the idea of having a subject as well. But maybe that's why I also asked if this should maybe be optional, because there might be, depending on your use case, it might be other ways to that are superior to using a subject like this. But I wouldn't say now that it's a definitive. It's definitely so that there is a superior way. So let's have it there at least. And maybe one suggestion from me would be that we could have it optional still, even in the cloud, in the SIG events part, before we know that it's the way to go for this kind of grouping.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that would make it at least backwards compatible if we, I guess, later on make it mandatory. No, it won't, right? It will be the other way around. Yeah. Whatever. No,
Yeah.
but I think we should have it there. We should define how it can be, how the data can be duplicated between the SIG events part and the cloud events part. So I embrace that.
Thanks. You know, that's very, very good input, Emil. So I think based on this, I'll make a PR. Then we can refine the details on the discussion there. Good. Then I would move to the next one, since you were mentioning, Emil, the discussion about linking produced events to consumed events. Yeah, so the idea on this one is, so I read the feature description. The SIG event specification should allow propagating identifiers from consumed events into produced events. When an activity is directly started as a consequence of a consumed event, an identifier of the consumed event must be included in the produced event related to the activity. Yeah. So when an activity is directly started as a consequence of a consumed event, a generic event, an identifier of the consumed event may be included in produced events related to the activity. So what I was trying to say here is that we want to be able to have the ability to track kind of chains of events, and if the source is a SIG event, they should be mandatory, and if the source is another kind of event, we would recommend it, but leave it as optional. And I was trying to figure out what would be a good way to identify source events. So I made some proposal, and there was some very good feedback from Matthias about how things are done. In Eiffel, and there was feedback from Eric as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember all the entire discussion. Right. I don't know. It sounds maybe, Emil, like you had some thoughts on this specific.
Yeah, I can just then re-mention how things are done in Eiffel. If you can stay on that picture there with all these bubbles are events then in Eiffel, and the arrows between them are these references between events. And what is discussed mainly through this issue are the events that cause another event to happen. And we, for that reason, in Eiffel call those references cause links. So we say that to the left there you see, for example, that activity triggered. What's called ACTT, which is activity triggered event, has a cause link to the STS, which is the source change submitted, and that means that the activity, which probably is a pipeline being started, was caused by some commit being merged in the SCM system. So that's the produced event then was the SCS, so the source change event there, and the new event from this was an activity event. And then, as you see, there are a lot of other arrows here with other names on them, and those are then other link types in Eiffel. So we can have references from depends on what kind of event you are sending. You can reference multiple other events with different types. So it doesn't need to be the cause of an event. So say, for example, that we have sent an event for an artifact being created or published, and then in some later test step, we might test that artifact. It doesn't mean that the test step itself was triggered by the artifact being created. It can have been triggered manually somehow, but still we would like to reference or link to that created artifact event, so we can build this complete graph of events. So in that case, it's not a cause link to the artifact. It's instead an element link we can see in this picture, for example. And there are also subject links. So there are different kinds of links for different purposes here. So what I mostly want to say, I guess, is that it would be good to be able to qualify the type of link we are providing. So in your suggestion, Andrea, I think you had a serialization proposal on how this can be added to the event. And I would then like to expand that proposal with making it possible as well to have a kind of link type within that string as well. And that it's possible then to reference multiple events as upstream events, so to say.
Can I just clarify, are these linking event types, is it just a one link, or is it more like tracing where you can follow it through?
So what do you say first?
Is it just a one-to-one, so the one link between two events, or is it like tracing?
That can be multiple links. So it's not just to visualize how things have executed in what order and what caused what, so to say, but you can trace any event, any activity in your CD pipeline, not just the actual causal relationships, but also other kinds of relationships between items in your pipeline, which all are represented by events.
Okay.
But you still need to have all the events, Emil, right? So let's say starting from the right, the art.p circle.
That's an artifact being published, yeah.
Yeah, I got the link to the artifact art.c.
Artifact created, yeah.
But in art.p, I don't have a link directly to the CD or SCS.
No,
so
exactly.
I can navigate, right?
Yeah. So for traceability reasons, I mean, or when you are, if you are this pipeline step or the process that sends that artifact published event to the far right, you probably know what artifact you are publishing. So you probably have some identifier of your artifact created that you can provide a link to, but you might not know in what pipeline step that artifact was created, or through what composition or baseline it was built, so to say. So you can't really directly link to even earlier events. But through this chain of event links, we could trace back to everything that has happened earlier in the same pipeline, or even in other pipelines, as long as there are relationships between these events. So we can even reference things that has happened in other pipelines and in upstream projects and more or less whatever, as long as they are notified through the SIG events then.
Right. Yeah, with us, I'm a bit trying to picture in my mind how different kind of links would work. When you receive,
I think maybe, yeah.
When you receive a link from an external platform, let's say, they test and deliver, they are done by two different platforms. So when you receive a link on the deliver side from the test side, the only context that you get is what's in the event.
Yeah.
Right.
But you still, I mean, you probably know, how should I put it? I mean, of course, you cannot reference anything else than what you have access to. You need to have some kind of way to identify. You could either have direct event IDs, which you could then use as reference links. But you could also, for example, have some kind of artifact identifier or some kind of what else should I take as an example? Some kind of baseline identifier or whatever, which you can use to make a lookup in some event database that has previously stored events being sent. And you can ask that database, hey, do you know if there is an event matching this artifact? Because I would like to reference that from my event. And then the database could answer, yeah, I know someone sent me an artifact created event with this ID. So this is probably the one you should refer to. And then those links can be created already there as well. So we don't need to perform all those lookups on the consumer end of all events. I mean, it could be done once and for all when sending an event. And then the consumer could just follow all these trace links back to see what has happened. And all consumers don't need to ask this database the same question because there will be references.
So if as part of our protocol, we define certain number of objects, let's say we define artifacts, define test suits, we define environments and so forth. And all these objects, so to say, they have a certain number of fields. Could we say then that when I'm sending an event, I should provide all the context available for that event, which might include objects that are not specific to the event. So if I'm sending an object about an environment created, I will provide the fields for the environment, but I could add an extra context with other objects that are related to what I'm doing. And so this would allow to create the links, right?
Yes. So in an example with an environment, for example, there you probably have some kind of, at least in the container space, you have probably some Docker image reference that you want to say, my environment is built up of this image, for example. But I created this environment not triggered by that image being built, but rather by something else happened in the pipeline. Someone said I should start a test activity, so therefore I create an environment for it. So the causal relationship would then be to that test activity being started somehow. But in your environment itself, you could have a reference to that Docker image being built, which in itself then could, of course, that image could be an artifact from another pipeline. Maybe that pipeline could have run several weeks ago in some other project, whatever. But still you can reference this through an event link. And I think that's quite powerful to have that possibility. I know that you, Eric, also have thought quite a lot of event linking, and you're a bit aware of how Eiffel does it. Do you have any better examples to provide to show how these links can be used and so on?
Not really. I mean, the main purpose I see of providing links is to mainly for visualization. So like without understanding how the flow was designed, you should be able to still be able to paint a picture of it by just following all the links backwards. That's one of the use cases I'm mostly interested in when it comes to linking.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But also it's very interesting to know, to be able to understand what upstream projects are included in this build that I'm performing right now. For example, to identify vulnerabilities in the project or whatever, then those questions could be answered directly by an event database which has this graph representation in it. And we don't need to go out and ask each GitHub project, which version did you include this fix for this vulnerability or whatever. Instead, it could already be in the event graph if we would have such multi-domain databases with events in some future.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to me. I understand better. And I think there is a lot of value. I totally agree. So I can try and give it a go again to spec some of this out. And then maybe we can have further discussion on it. Based on the discussion today.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Yeah, we're almost at time. There are 7 minutes left. There is one more issue that we could discuss, or there is some discussion that we could have on the SDKs or proof of concepts updates from the projects. Anyone has anything that they would like to bring up that is more time critical for the last few minutes?
I guess when it comes to the SDK, I think, well, or I hope I have a very simple question. Does anyone have any strong opinions on what like project management or dependency management solution we use for the Python SDK? So I know there is something called Poetry. I've tried to like it, but I still don't. Setup tools would be my favorite. It's old, but works really well. But does anyone have any strong opinions on it?
No, I don't have. So sorry, I've been using Python for several years, some years ago, but my opinion on Python might be a bit out of date. So I don't want to say we should use this or that based on what I seen done like 5 years ago. So.
Yeah, and I guess it could probably be changed quite easily if we wanted to. So yeah, because yeah, if we don't have an opinion, then the first one who starts something can just pick something reasonable. We'll go with that, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, then I'm happy with that. Thanks.
Okay. Good. For the SDK, still one question that I had in my mind was, do we need any kind of dedicated work stream for that, or any place for people working on the different SDKs to sync, or maybe not? I mean, they're going to be fairly independent anyways, but or we just continue asynchronously. Sounds like we can continue to progress like we're doing now on those. Good. All right. Anything else? Okay, then just quickly, maybe just wanted to mention this issue. It's about the CD service published event proposed by Mauricio as part of the Knative POC. So I left a comment there. I think the new event makes sense, but there is also a possibility of having fewer events and maybe having extra nuances for the event in the extra field. Just wanted to know what people thought about it. Maybe you can comment on the issue, or I don't know if there is anything, any idea or any comment that people have already right now. It would be great. I don't want to hold the work that Mauricio is doing on this, but so maybe we can comment on the issue and discuss it further on Slack if needed.
Yeah.
All right. About the POCs, there is an issue on SIG Events that Mauricio created. So if you're interested in understanding what is going on with the Knative POC, please have a look in there. For the matrix POC, so the idea that we use Eric for our submission to KubeCon, to use CD events to collect metrics across multiple platforms. Work has not really started there yet, but I was going to create an issue to describe what we plan to do there, and yeah, take it from there. We can have further discussion next time. And finally, the last seconds, I put a section in the agenda that I thought we could use in general, maybe for the next meetings, if there is something to be said, getting updates from the different projects of different implementers of CD events. So on the Tecton side, we are working with VPAF. We are resuming work on the experimental controller. So we set up a roadmap for the project and we're setting up a plan on how to move the controller out of experimental into being an official component of Tecton, which would be great because then we would have official support for CD events in Tecton, and it would be a really nice place to be. Yeah, I don't know if there is any other update. I think we are at time now, so maybe we can continue next time.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Great to see everyone. Thanks for a great meeting, and until next time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Andreas.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.